I want to welcome everybody. This is our first evening of the 2023 Community Workshop Series of the Seattle MLK Organizing Coalition. This evening, you'll be participating in the second of 15 workshops. 7 are virtual, running from tonight through Saturday. 8 workshops will be in person, held at Garfield High School on Monday morning before the annual march and rally. And we have one special event as well, a community discussion on mass incarceration with the Black Prisoners Caucus on Thursday evening at Washington Hall. You can learn about all of these events on our website. I'll put the link in the chat in a moment. Before I introduce you to tonight's presenters, I want to mention a couple of logistics. This workshop uses a webinar format. When you put something in the chat, only the presenters will see it. If you want to ask a question, please use the Q&A function. The panelists may hold questions until the end of their presentation, but they will see your questions. Finally, if you want to use closed captioning, please look for the captioning button at the bottom of your screen. You may need to look for the 3 dots that say more. If you click on them, then you'll see the access to captioning. Now I'd like to introduce you to the team from Seattle's African American Reparations Committee, which initiated Seattle's reparations proposal. Local activists and community leaders have proposed that Seattle create a task force to identify harms relative to racial exclusion and discrimination, and to develop a plan for reparative justice. In this workshop, you'll learn about this groundbreaking initiative to develop a reparations plan for Seattle. And now I'm going to turn over the mic to Kevin Allen to get us started.
Well, good evening and welcome to everyone. My name is Kevin Allen and I'm a member of this committee. I am a member of the Washington Federation of State Employees, Local 843, as well as a member of other organizations, including the Puget Sound chapter of the Coalition of Black Trade Unionists. And the first thing we want to do, that is our practice in many organizations, is to give a land acknowledgement. And I will do so at this time. As a community, we acknowledge the many benefits that we have of being in this place. It is a space we share with all living beings, human and non-human. It is an ancient space where others have lived before us. This is a space that was initially inhabited, and I am sitting on in Seattle in the lands of the Duwamish people. And we would like to pause to reflect on all the people of traditional and ancient lands and our relationships with the people. We respectfully acknowledge all Native American peoples who have lived on this land, in particular in the state of Washington. And we want to pay respect to all of the affiliated tribes upon the state of Washington, of whom this historical land we are presently taking space of. And let's take a minute to acknowledge and remember the people whose land that we are occupying in some ways and living on, and think about the harm that was done to those people, and make sure that we do our best, that we don't continue that harm, that we do things to make sure that this land is enhanced for their historical benefit and for ours as well. Thank you. So now we will turn it over to our fearless leader who will give us the introduction of himself as well as get us started.
All right, I'd like to begin by thanking Kevin Allen for that wonderful land acknowledgement. And I'd like to thank all of you who have tuned in to spend the next hour plus with us talking about what we hope to be a very important project and commitment that we hope our city mayor, city council, and all the residents of Seattle will join us in making a commitment, and that is to provide reparatory justice to the African American community who has made Seattle their home over the last century. The first thing that I would like to say about reparations, and it's probably something that most participants have not thought about, the 46 million African Americans who reside in the United States, it will still be another 89 years before any of us have been free in North America, as long as we were slaves. That is, in North America, in colonial America, and throughout US history, for 246 years, Black people were slaves, and it's only been a little over 150 years that we've been freed. And still a long, like I said a little earlier, a long time, another 80 years plus before we will have been free citizens in the United States, as long as we were slaves here in North America. And I think that provides a excellent backdrop for our discussion of what we propose be done in Seattle to create a lot more equity and equality and justice here in our community, and what that's going to take. Thank you. Now I'll turn it over to Andra Kranzler to introduce herself and to move on.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Larry. Thank you so much for having me be here today. I am representing the Lauren Miller Bar Association. I'm the vice president of events, and the Lauren Miller Bar Association is the Washington State Organization for African American Attorneys and Judges. We've been around for 55 years. We work to advance social and economic well-being of our membership while improving relationships between the legal profession and community at large. And we seek to provide leadership, networking opportunities, and outlets to address complex issues in our community. And so one of the ways that we do that is that we support community, and I'm excited to be part of the SARC. In my day job, I'm the directing attorney of the Tenant Law Center, and we do eviction defense for renters in King County. And I am also the board president of the Public Defenders Association, which advocates for reentry, criminal justice reform, and harm reduction with dignity and action. So it's a real pleasure to be here, and I will pass the baton to Kevin. Thank you.
Well, one of the things that we want to talk about is the history of reparations. And we'll probably start to go through that when we go to the slide. But I will just start off, and I was thinking about this today, and it's really struck me. I was thinking about Representative Hakeem Jeffries, and he did the A to Z speech. And what struck me when I think about the reparations issue when he got to the letter Y said, yes, we can, as opposed to you can't do it. And I think that that's an attitude. We're having this workshop today. We're having one on Saturday. And I think that we have to get into that yes, we can mode, because there's too many times people have said, you can't do it. And I think about this fight for reparations. The earliest version of HR 40 was first introduced into the House by Representative John Conyers back in 1989. So I don't know if we need to go any further. We want to get into the slides, and I'll get ahead of myself.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do, who you represent, and why you're on?
Okay, well, I can do that again. Like I said,
Get it.
So we need to just
went
start the screen show. I'm sorry. Did you say all of your?
Well, I said enough.
He did an introduction.
Awesome, cool.
I'm a member of the Washington Federation of State Employees, Local 843, and I am also Vice President of the Puget Sound chapter of the Coalition of Black Trade Unionists. I'm part of lots of other groups, but this is sufficient, and I'm honored to be a panelist here today and a part of the MLK Organizing Coalition.
Yeah.
Kevin's going to get back into the history on the role of the federal government in just a moment, but we want to just kind of just kick it off a little bit, just kind of grounding us in some truth. Right now, the racial wealth gap for Black African Americans is abysmal. It's the reason we're here today to talk about reparations. White households' median net worth grew from $124,600 in 1992 to $189,100 in 2019, and that's with the adjustment for inflation. While Black households' median net worth only grew from $8,000 to $24,000 across the nation. More specifically, in Seattle, the median household income for a Black person is $42,500 in 2018, in comparison to households headed by a white person had a median income of $105,100. And in 2019, the median household net worth for Black households in Seattle was $23,300, and for a white household, it was $456,000. So that is our truth, and that is why we're here to talk about reparations. And we're here to talk about reparations at this local level because of what has or has not happened at the federal level. And this is pass it to Kevin.
Well, as stated before, we're talking about the current iteration of reparations in the United States, 21-22. HR 40 was once again introduced in January 2021 in the 117th Congress by Sheila Jackson Lee, and there was a commission to study and develop reparation proposals for African American Act. And basically, as it has been for a long time, the bill is to establish a commission to study, to develop reparation proposals for African Americans. The commission shall examine slavery and discrimination in the colonies in the United States from 1619 to the present to recommend appropriate remedies. The commission will identify the role of federal and state governments in supporting the institution of slavery, roles of discrimination in the public and private sectors against freed slaves and their descendants, and the lingering negative effects of slavery on living African Americans and society today. And as I was saying earlier, the reason why I'm thinking about yes, we can versus you can't do it, because, and one of the reasons why we're here today and why others are taking steps forward is because HR 40 was originally introduced by John Conyers in 1989. And he introduced that piece of legislation every year until he resigned and retired in 2017. And it's still being introduced. Now, Representative Sheila Jackson Lee of Texas is leading the charge to push it through Congress. And of course, if we think about today, we should expect Republican opposition in the committee, and it's unlikely that it'll even make it to a floor to get a vote. And even if it does, you'd have to have 10 Republicans to do it. And Mitch McConnell has already said, and he's been quite open to speak against it. So that's one of the reasons why we have to look at it from another way, because yes, we can. And I think that when we start moving further on into the presentation, we can look into what are the ways that we can move on this issue, and why it's important that we talk about it now from the framework for which we're presenting it here in the city of Seattle. Now, hopefully that gives a little background, a little history, and a little rationale why we're trying to keep it moving and keep it moving forward.
Wonderful, thank you. So states have taken action. California put together Assembly Bill 3121, and that established a task force to study and develop reparations proposals for African Americans, with a special consideration for African Americans who are descendants of persons enslaved in the US. The SARC looked at the state of California as an example. Mainly, they've just really put a lot of thought and attention into studying and developing a reparations proposal for African Americans, to recommend appropriate ways to educate the California public of the task force findings, and to recommend appropriate remedies in the consideration of the task force findings. In addition, we looked at the Evanston, one local example. It's the city of Evanston in Illinois. In June 2019, the Evanston government recognized that most, if not all, communities in the United States, the community and the government had allowed perpetuated racial disparities through the use of many regulatory and policy-oriented tools. So they recognized that first through a resolution. And then in November of 2019, the Evanston City Council adopted another resolution, 126-R-19, and that actually established the City of Evanston's Reparations Fund and a reparations subcommittee. And they identified funding source from their city's municipal cannabis retailers acquisition tax as 3% on gross sales of cannabis. And they earmarked the first $10 million to fund local reparations for housing and economic development programs for Black Evanston residents. The first reparations initiative developed by the City of Evanston, again, is a restorative housing program. And the program acknowledges the harm caused to African American, Black Evanston residents due to discriminatory housing policies and practices in inaction on the part of the city from 1919 to 1969. That fund will support home ownership, home improvement, and mortgages, which I think is really exciting. There's some criticism from Evanston because it just did this home that focused on housing as their first policy. And so folks maybe had other things that they thought wanted to be prioritized, but the subcommittee decided on home ownership and then and home improvements and mortgage assistance. I think it was 25,000. Larry or Kevin, correct me if I'm wrong. The amount that they're earmarked is not, necessarily proportionate.
25,000.
25,000, yeah.
Also.
So it's a significant amount of money in the fact that it's $25,000. That's a grant. It's not anything that somebody would have to pay back, and it's given to African Americans in reparations. It's not a direct payout, but they had some issues of wanting to like make sure that whatever they gave directly to the person, that it wasn't going to be absorbed all by taxes, I think was one of the critiques. So anyhow, just to show that it's not perfect, there were some compromises, but they did it. They put a plan into action and they did it. And to just kind of just carry on the note of what Kevin was saying, you know, yes, we can, and maybe, and so just to have ideas about what we could be thinking of as we think about the city of Seattle. And now I will pass it to Mary.
I want to just ask if somebody's got, there was some kind of background noise going on, and I'm not quite sure where it was coming from. But if there was possibility of muting it, that would be great. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Now to Seattle. My two colleagues have done a very good job at laying out some broad outlines as to why the inspiration for doing reparations in Seattle exists. But now let me be specific. This effort began when PSARA, Puget Sound area folks for Retired Action sponsored a seminar on reparations back in November of 2022 and here in Seattle, and about 130 folks participated. And we found from the keynote speaker, Mr. Ron Daniels, Dr. Ron Daniels, the president of the National Reparations. Could you turn that radio off, please? The National African American Reparations Commission, that he told us that 100 cities, because of the difficulty that Andra just talked about with getting something done nationally, that there were cities, 100 cities throughout the US trying to do something around reparations. He highlighted that they have already been successful in Evanston, Illinois. And as of that speech, about 30 people had gotten, 30 families, Black families had gotten help in getting money from the city because of the long history of housing discrimination. The average amount per household was $25,000. Now that number is up to 200 families have gotten up to $25,000 to help either purchase a new house or do remodeling on existing housing stock that Black families are in Evanston. We also learned from Dr. Daniels that he had already begun discussions with Mayor Jenny Durkin of Seattle. And when she was here and was preparing to run again for mayor, she had made a commitment of upwards of $80 million for Black families in Seattle to secure reparations. And she said this would be something that she would push for in the next year. And he and a core group of about 20 representatives of Black organizations in Seattle had gotten together to work with her. But then she killed that idea by indicating that she would not run for mayor again. And we didn't hear about all this until Ron came and spoke to us. And the folks on that webinar, sponsored by PSARA here in our community, got excited. We met with Ron at the end and said, we want to reintroduce an effort. So on May 6th, representatives of our newly formed African American Reparations Committee met with the new mayor, May of 2022. We met with Mayor Bruce Harrell, and he said, you guys are talking too long. And I'm already down for reparations in Seattle. And as an African American and a Japanese American man, I fully understand why reparations are needed. And I think our city should do something. So he made a commitment. The very next day, May 7th, we met with 2022, this is last year, we met with 7 representatives of the 9 seats on the city council, told them the mayor had made a commitment for reparations. And they, at that time, we had with us the woman, the city council woman from Evanston, Illinois, had flown out with Ron Daniels to participate in this series of meetings with the mayor and the city council here in Seattle. And she vividly described what they had been able to accomplish. A commitment of $25,000 for every family that could show that they were direct descendants of African Americans who lived in Evanston, Illinois from 1919 to 1968. That was the period that they chose to focus upon, and were heavily discriminated against in the arena of housing. And they were able to successfully get the mayor, the city council, and the community to work on that effort, and it's still going now. So we took those remarkable examples, got a commitment from the mayor, and 7 members of the city council said we're very interested in working with our new mayor, Harold, and seeing what we can do here in Seattle. And we just, the mayor asked us to put a letter together outlining what areas should be studied, focused upon, where we could get the best bang for the buck. And then he would be willing to put together a committee that would work on a specific strategy of harm reduction to African-American families who have lived in Seattle since World War I and World War II, when the great majority of Black families moved out to Seattle and were discriminated against in housing and many other areas. All of this inspired us to have a meeting on the afternoon of May 7th with representatives of 41 African-American organizations. And we told them that the mayor and the city council have made a commitment and to doing something around reparations for African-American descendants of slaves who have resided in Seattle. And we would look at 6 areas: education, criminal justice, housing, economic development and discrimination, and come up with proposals for what we think the mayor and the city council should be willing to work with us on doing here in Seattle. And now we're having this webinar as part of this year, which is the 40th anniversary of the March on Washington that took place in the 40th anniversary of the first organizing effort to pay tribute to Dr. King in Seattle, which was 1983, 40 years ago. And we're the only city in the nation that every year has, from the grassroots up, has mobilized support for Dr. King's legacy, and have had workshops and a huge rally centered at Garfield High School, which is right in the center of the central area. And this year, this coming Monday, the 16th, will be the 40th year that we've mobilized around this issue. And that's why, as part of that effort, we're having this seminar, as well as one on Monday morning at 9:30 a.m. at Garfield, to focus more on what kind of broad community support for reparations for African-American households that we can build to keep the pressure and the reminding that mayor the willingness he has already shown to do something in the arena of reparations for Blacks. Andra already pointed out to you that the wealth gap here in Seattle is $426,000 per white household versus 23,000 average wealth for Black households in Seattle. That's much worse than it was in South Africa when the whole anti-apartheid movement, it got started in the early 1970s. So we definitely think that it is highly warranted that we build what hopefully, as I conclude my remarks, hopefully will be the largest commitment of reparative justice that any city has put together. And we're hopeful that we can do that in Seattle. And we hope that we can get support from all of you who are listening tonight. It will be rallying with us on Monday, this coming Monday, the 16th of January. We celebrate Martin Luther King's birthday. Thank you very much for being with us tonight. Andra, where do we go from here? Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know what was going on. The fan on my computer may have been causing that background noise. I'm not.
Oh,
I have no idea, but I apologize if
yeah,
you
it was
hear me.
loud.
It was like there's no any, so I apologize. And the next thing we're gonna do is Kevin is actually gonna walk through the proposals, what our ask is, if we're gonna.
And then we'll be opening it up for questions from the audience, the listening audience.
Okay.
Kevin.
I think we had to go. Here we go. This is the proposal that we have, and I'll kind of just read through it. And this is the request we made from the committee to the mayor in general. This was our proposal. We propose that the mayor's office, the Seattle City Council, the Seattle African American Reparations Committee, and other community groups develop a plan that will create funding to support harm reduction efforts that make amends for harms done to African American descendants of those enslaved in the United States who made Seattle home. All members of this special mayoral committee on reparations should be composed of representatives of the harmed African American community that lived or once lived in Seattle and should be vetted by the Seattle African American Reparations Committee. We are also very aware that many African Americans have been forced out of Seattle in recent decades due to displacement and gentrification. And for the major harms identified, the Seattle African American Reparations Committee will work with the city to identify just and fair ways to repair these harms. The harms identified, as Councilmember Gossett had said, must center on 8 areas: housing, economics, business development, education, criminal justice, civil rights, technology, and healthcare. And this report should start at the city's founding and run to the present day. The city should publish interim public reports as each decade of history is completed. If major barriers to completing this work are discovered, the city should notify the Seattle African American Reparations Committee what is making things difficult to implement. And we know that there's going to be some roadblocks, there always are. The city should partner with the Seattle African American Reparations Committee on the research process. The city should have a mechanism to receive claims of racist harms from individuals and institutions so that the city can investigate these claims in order to fully understand its own history. The work should begin at once and be properly resourced by the city government so that it's fully completed within 6 months to a year. And so the question becomes, what does reparations mean to you? And this is where we can get some feedback. And what would it look like for the city of Seattle. And please put your comments in the chat, and then we could have a little dialogue on that area. We've highlighted certain areas: housing, economics, business development, education, criminal justice, civil rights, technology, healthcare. What would it look like to you? What do you think in the ideal world? This is the time to, as they say, dream big, ideal. Put it all out there. And what would it look like to you in terms of what you think would be fair and equitable? There's always a lot of opinion, and part of this workshop is to solicit your opinions.
And what I'd like to add real quickly is that if these are not the arenas that some of you think are the most relevant for Black people here in Seattle, let us know that too, because now we'd like to know what you think about our presentation, about the need for reparations in our city, our suggestions on what we have already submitted to the mayor as ideas for being successful at mobilizing people to address this issue in Seattle. But if you think we're off kilter or something else should be done, please let us know now. We'd like to have a dialogue and a discussion with you at this moment until we conclude this workshop. And we really appreciate those of you who decided to take time out of your busy schedules to join us on this evening. Thank you. How are we going to handle questions, Katie?
I'm sorry, this is Andra. But I have
Andra.
a question in the chat, or statement rather. It's from Joshua, and Joshua's asking if we have asked Mayor Harrell in Seattle to sign on with other mayors nationwide fighting for reparations, and then provided a link to moremayors.org. And I think that's a great idea.
Is that the question?
Yes.
Okay, I'm the convener of the 40 African-American organizations that have signed on to this effort, and they range from Tabor 100 Black businesses, Black Lives Matter organizations that mobilize people in the summer of 2021 when George Floyd got killed, to the traditional Black civil rights organization, Urban League, NAACP. We have a very large range of organizations that are part of this effort already, and we'd like to add to it. So that's where we're at.
I'd like to just throw in 2 cents, and thank you, Joshua, for putting it in that question in the chat and clicking on that link. And I just clicked on it, and it's that's very inspiring to see other cities at least dealing with the issue and approaching it, as well as states like California. So, like we said, it's been in the federal realm. You know, we're trying to get federal legislation since 1989. And sometimes, just like we see the $15 an hour and some of the other things started locally, becomes national. Hopefully that'll be a template that will help us get reparations for African Americans, because it has been done. So sometimes you have to start and grow your own. And this is our local effort to do that. So I'm inspired about that. And thanks for putting that in the, in the chat. That's more grist for the mill.
Right on.
Do we want to read some of the, so Jenny said family wealth, particularly home ownership. I think that Seattle should try to account for the ways in which the city and state policy.
Speak up, Andra. What? Can't hear you.
Family wealth, particularly home ownership. I think that Seattle should try to account for the ways in which the city and state policy have limited Black home ownership.
Okay.
Jenny then also said, I really like the idea of a decade by decade inquiry. I've seen documentation of how East Coast cities, Boston, New York, benefited from slavery, but I haven't seen those connections made for West Coast cities. Then Sarah Klaus said, Candide, sorry, healthcare, equal access to healthcare, which means providers close to home for underserved zip codes that provide care beyond 8 to 5 hours, equity in referrals for white versus Black patients, and extra access clinics for underserved people so we can repair the disparity in access currently between the white versus Black and other historically underserved communities.
Okay, let us briefly try to address a couple of those questions. The first one around housing. It's very difficult to talk about the actual impact that these policy differentials have made on people. But here's one simple thing that I think most listeners and participants can appreciate. In 1972, even though Seattle was a highly segregated city, and in 1961, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. came to Seattle himself, and the motivation was housing segregation and the need to inspire an open housing movement. And he came here in the fall of '61. And at that time, he told the audiences before whom he spoke that Seattle is now the 5th most segregated city in all the land. 88% of the Black community lives in the central area. But at that time, or a few years after, with that segregation, I don't know what the reasons are. We had about, by 1970, 71% of all Black households in Seattle were purchasing their own homes. Today, that figure is down to 36 because of the horrific impact that the gentrification of the central area and Rainier Valley has had on Black household. It's really difficult in this competitive market to have enough money to pay down for a house. So we're overwhelmingly renters now, and much more so than we were in the 1960s and the 1970s. So that has to be dealt with. And I'm glad that the person who brought up the issue about housing brought that question up. Last question after that you read, Andra, I don't remember what it was for us.
Health was one of the issues. Health access was another one, and I can pull back up.
And I would like to add that Jenny's question about the idea of decade by decade inquiry, and growing up in the segregated north of Philadelphia, I know that all those eastern cities were very segregated and benefited from slavery. I'll also add that that same type of process is being looked at by other institutions, including some of our what they call PWIs, primarily white institutions, who are trying to do their own form of repair because they know that some of the buildings were built by slaves, the labor that was free labor that was given, and even some of their foundational funds were based on the sale and trafficking of Black people. And so there's lots of organizations and institutions that are looking at their own role in the culpability. And of course, we know it's baked into the system. So we've had disparity in healthcare, employment, contracting, and everything else. So when we look at it decade by decade, we can actually pinpoint some of the laws that were put into place and see when they started, when they ended. Of course, we had racial, restrictive covenant, and all those things play into a factor. So that's why we really want the city to resource the research to be able to identify all the harm. And that's going to be a big part of identifying and quantifying what it is.
Are there other questions? And can people ask questions where we can actually hear the questions, Katie, or do they have to put it in the chat?
They have to put them in the chat. That's the way the webinar is set up to control for trolls. I'm sorry to say.
There is a question from Sash in that question. Will this PowerPoint be accessible to participants after the webinar? And we appreciate you saying that it's very valuable information. And I know that there will be some things when we get to the end, and because we are asking everybody to register, if we get the information, there will be some opportunities for us to get feedback from you and also give you some follow-up feedback from us. So those things will be taken into consideration. And thanks for the question.
Minimally, we can send people the letter that we sent to the mayor, and we can keep your email address or phone number if you indicate that you'd like to be supportive or involved in this effort here in our community.
I'm wondering if I can just mention what's going to be happening at the in-person workshop on Monday, which is going to be highly interactive. And it's going to be very different in that regard from this one. So on Monday, attendees are going to practice making their case for reparations, building a case that they can use with their friends and neighbors. And people are going to work in small groups and do brainstorming, and the work that people are going to do on Monday is going to kind of filter out and be used as the basis for creating discussions throughout the community on reparations. So people who are here might be interested in attending that. And with that, I'll go back to disappearing.
Well, thank you. And I'll just add that I see that there's a question from Robbie Stern from Passara. What is the plan for mobilizing the broader community to support reparations? And I'll take this personal privilege because we know that in many cases, to get this type of thing, and so even if the mayor says, I want to do it, or the city council says, I want to do it, we need broad public support. And, you know, in the words of Snoop Dogg, the game is to be sold, not told. And we can talk all about it, but if we don't sell it to the public that they involve in it, because it might even involve some perhaps increase of taxing, raising funds to do this, or allocating money to support this. If the public doesn't go for it, it makes it less likely to happen, which is what's happened at the federal level. So having this opportunity to discuss it, because for many of us for a long time, and it's been said that at first only 19% of people by polling in 1989 said they were for reparations. In 2020, that percent is up to 31%. So you still got a 69% that's either neutral or not for it. And like anything else, you got to get at least 50 or more percent. So we have a lot of our own folks who say, no, we can't do it. It'll never happen. That's why it's, yes, we can, as opposed to you can't do it. So this will be an opportunity on Saturday to think about how we talk to our friends, our neighbors, our coworkers, our elected officials, and even sometimes to ourselves to say, well, we got this, we can do this. And that's one of the reasons why this workshop on Saturday will give you the opportunity to say it for yourself and how you would say it to others. So we're thankful to be able to make that available for everyone. We hope everyone comes to participate.
And I'd like to add to talking to Robbie Stern. We have these 10 areas, Robbie, and we'd like to remind people that we're asking the mayor to take 6 months to a year to come up with a proposal. But we're not asking him to do that by himself. We don't even think that the city can be as successful as it possibly can be on behalf of the community if we just insularly leave it up to city bureaucrats to come up with a plan. We're insisting that some of us from the committee, people from the broader African American community, and specialists in each of these 10 areas, Robbie, be identified that can help us come up with the best possible plan for the people of Seattle in each of these 10 areas. And we certainly, none of us have a monopoly on how to phrase questions in each of these 9 or 10 areas that we put up on the screen. And we certainly don't know how we get that 31% up to 70% of Seattleites or people nationally that see the cause and the justice of reparations. There's a lot of ways that people in the broader community can be helpful. Just building political support in all the neighborhoods. If we had people in 30 community councils that it currently exists or might exist as a result of this effort, it would be good to coordinate each of those 30 groups in Magnolia, or South Seattle, or the north end of Seattle, all coming together and making suggestions of what we can do on behalf of reparative justice here in Seattle. It's a lot of things that people can do, and we certainly don't have a monopoly on suggesting what all those things are. So we need help. That's why we hope that all of you will sign up to do something as we follow through, but we need your email. We need your phone numbers. We need to know what your interest is. Thank you for that question, sir. What's the next question?
Sorry, there's a couple of things. So how we're seeking help from other people, groups of color. Again, we're trying to mobilize the whole community, and so folks live with intersectionality, and so hopefully by having this conversation today and the conversation
Monday,
continue ongoing, having this conversation, building the relationship with the folks in our community who really are passionately thinking about these issues, spending their time, overcoming some of the challenges that racism causes in our daily life. This isn't a moment where it's we do it by one person can do it by themselves. This really is a moment where each one of us needs to have a big, hairy, audacious goal about about why reparations is needed for African Americans. in the United States. And, you know, for me, my reasons are really simple. I don't, I, you know, I think that homelessness and the power to evict somebody from housing or to take housing away from somebody is a badge of slavery. Um, and I think that the prison industrial complex is a big component um, of how the society and our systems just continue to benefit off of um, um, the lived terror of harm caused to Black men and women and our children. So, um,
Yeah.
uh,
Just
reasons, right? And
uh,
so everyone has to have their reasons and to start having these conversations. Um,
right.
Sneha
Just
is one of the people that serves on the SARC. He's not African American, and he is just a really strong advocate for economic and labor justice and movement building. And um, I'm motivated and moved by my history, which is legacy, equality, leadership, and organizing, and the pillars of no separate peace. And I think that. You know, I definitely think Japanese Americans deserved reparations, and I would stand in any room and say that, and I hope that we'll be able to build relationships with the Japanese community for members of the community to come and say Black folks deserve reparations too. So those are the ways that I'm thinking, and you know, I'm open to hearing how you're thinking to.
yeah. Uh, I've heard recently a lot of the conservative forces in our society, like Mitch McConnell and Kevin McCarthy and former President Trump, all of them have said that this is ridiculous. There is not one slave master or one slave still alive today. So why would we have to have discussions and do something about something that ended 150 years ago, back in 1865? It is not easy to answer that question. So people being able to formulate and help us develop what all the resistance explanations will be and how to counteract those would be extremely valuable to us. Yeah. How much more time do we have, Andra? We were supposed to end this at 8.
Yeah, we have 15 more minutes. One of the questions is there another city besides Evanston, Illinois that's done this? They're the only ones that I know that have actually put a policy in place, a city, but I think we should look at this moremayors.org to see, to learn more about what other cities are doing. And
And we should tell them a little bit more about what California is doing, because the
yeah,
governor there has, it didn't already receive legislative support. He did an executive order, got with Black elected officials all throughout the state of California. And they've been working about 1.5 years, and they're going to be working for 6 more months to come up with strategies about, and those strategies will be ready in June of 2023, about what specific programs he's going to push to get funded in California that would be targeted for assisting and helping descendants of former chattel slaves here in our society. And they've written a 65-page booklet that just summarizes the suggestions that they're doing research in. And we can make that available to people who want to find out what kind of planning has already been done at either the state or the city levels. I know that Boston is about ready to come up with the suggestions that they have of things they want to do in that city. But that's something people can help us research. If there's 100 cities, which 20 of them have done the most research on what kinds of things that can be done at a local level, and I know that we can learn from them. There's a lot that can be done. We just need folks from all walks of life in our community to let us know to what extent they would like to and can help us out to make Seattle an extremely successful example of what can be done to improve human and economic rights for Black people in our broader community. Thank you.
I love that. Robbie asks if we are part of an organization and want someone from the Seattle African American Reparations Committee to speak to our members who are interested, will SARC members be able to lead such a discussion? And I just said, would you provide your email? We can follow up with you, but I think that that's a great question to ask out loud.
And I'm confident that we'll have people that from our 40 organization coalition that would be willing to be trained and go out and speak to various organizations in the broader community here in the Pacific Northwest to push this issue and get more and more people involved. So I would say yes to Robbie, we'll be able to do that.
I would just also add that, like everything else, we started, and you plant the seed, you water it, and it will grow. Start from the city, grow to the county, to the state, and eventually that inertia will spread out, and we can eventually get some type of federal legislation and recognition. But it does have to start somewhere, and we have a lot of little sprouts sprouting up all over the country. And you get enough of them going, you put those flowers together, you got a bouquet. And then when you have a bouquet, next you know, you get a plot and a lawn, then you get a field, and you can cover everything. So we just have to look at that as a building block. Like I said, a lot of things take a long time, and John Conyers, may his soul rest in peace, and those that were before him. Like I said, HR 40, which was designed and named 40 because of the promise of 40 acres and a mule, was brought to Congress in 1989. And now we're at 2023. And I'm not even sure if we'll get to the floor this year, but we say that you have to be persistent and be steadfast and unmovable and always working in order to get to where we need to go. And so I'll just leave it like that.
Yeah, and the three of us are members of the, are supporters of the Martin Luther King, the Seattle Martin Luther King County coalition. So we definitely know that back in 1999, we started a similar effort to rename this county, and this idea percolated through the Martin Luther King Celebration Committees, what we called ourselves then. It percolated out, and we got thousands and thousands of King County residents from every walk of life who carried petitions, who signed petitions, who sponsored little neighborhood block by block meetings about what we thought could accrue from this county renaming itself after Martin Luther King Jr. and changing the symbol of our government to a much more democratic one. And that is an image of Dr. King rather than an imperial crown, which was the image of our government back then. So we're confident that starting from the grassroots level, we can build a mighty force of supporters that would will reparations being developed for the African-American population in this community. And as a result of how we do it, we will become an exemplar for other communities around the nation and hopefully around the world. So we're just asking our neighbors to join us in this effort. I'm confident that we can build a coalition where we can take support and help from every walk of life that exists here in the Pacific Northwest. How are we doing on time, Andra?
We are at 8:08, and so I've captured comments that answering our questions, and then emails and suggestions. So I put that in an email. That'll go to our little committee here.
Okay.
Getting the
Good.
letter, the PowerPoint, the Evanston and the State of California information out to folks. And really hope we'll see you and get to meet you in person on Monday. And we just want to say thank you for your time. I apologize on my end.
And Katie, does the Martin Luther King Celebration Coalition have a number of email for people who find out from participants tonight and they want to tell them how they can be involved? Do we have some address or phone number we can give them?
Well, I just put the link in the chat to the website.
Okay.
And I can also put in an email address for the workshops. MLK Seattle Workshops @gmail.com. And
So we don't have any phone number they can call.
no, we don't have a phone number.
Okay.
At least not that I know about. But we urge you to complete the evaluation form for this workshop, and you will receive in a couple of days an email from us that has more information about upcoming workshops, but also gives you links and resources from this workshop. And we want to thank you very much for coming. And we look forward to seeing you at other virtual workshops and then at our special event with the Black Prisoners Caucus on Thursday evening.
What time will that be, the Black Prisoners?
It starts at 5:30. It includes dinner, and it's a community discussion for people of all ages. It runs until 8 p.m. And it should be really, really very wonderful. And then the workshops, the virtual workshops, the online workshops run through Saturday. And then Sunday we have our youth event, which will also be virtual this year. And you can find out about that on our website as well. And then Monday we have the in-person workshops, which are going to be really great. And followed by the rally and the march. So with that, we're going to conclude this workshop, and thank you so much.
Again, the workshops at Garfield on Monday morning begin at 9:30, and then there's going to be a big community rally in Garfield Gym at 11, and then we're going to have a community march at 12:30, also leaving from in front of Garfield. That is always a massive success. And these efforts to pay honor and tribute to the late, great Martin Luther King Jr.
So thank you very much to our panel, and thank you to our attendees.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.